Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Friday webinar on healthy hedgerows, keeping us connected. I'm Dan. I'm the head of innovation, but also a zoologist by training, and I'm delighted to spend the next 30 minutes or so speaking a bit about hedgerows, why we love them, why they're so important, but also about how the Land app can help you start managing your hedgerow network, however big or small it may be. As per usual, I'm just going to run through a quick agenda with a bit of housekeeping. I'm going to then be talking through the importance of hedgerows and the importance of their role in connectivity, so how they can help connect up the landscapes. We're then going to do a bit of just an overview of an example of a project that we're working with called the Oxfordshire Treescapes, where I'll just be summarising the project itself, what it's focusing on, what's happened up to now, and a bit of future direction, and hopefully that will feed into any questions you may have that we'll answer at the end. And then the third part, although it says the third part twice, apologies, that's my fault, just how the Land app can help. So we're going to do a bit of a recap on our WildEdges workflow that we've been enhancing, and actually released a little bit of an update earlier last week, but also going to be talking about connectivity indexing and just touching on the mobile app. So we're probably not going to be presenting for the full hour today, but as always, as it's a webinar, your cameras will remain off and your microphones will remain muted. But if you do have any questions throughout, whether that's to do with the specific topic or anything general about Land app, please do feel free to use the Q&A function, and we can hopefully touch on those at the end. So I just wanted to spend a couple of moments just acknowledging a hedgerow. We're in a beautiful country where hedgerows have been a staple of our environment ever since agriculture. They're not truly a fully natural asset. They're not, you don't really find a straight linear hedgerow in nature, but what they are is a really nice balance between what nature is intending and what humans have sculpted, so to speak. And they you find them in all different shapes and sizes. They're managed in different ways, and they provide all these different benefits as well. So the main benefits that we're looking at is the hedgerow itself being a habitat. So obviously this time of year in particular, how the hedgerow is being managed, what state and condition it's in, will affect what type of habitat you have. I know people are going to be out flailing, but there's obviously the indication right now is if you are in a management scenario for your hedgerow, the later you leave it, the more likely are that you're going to be holding berries and fruits into the winter. Particularly, I was just walking out this morning, particularly as we've had such a warm start to winter. So a lot of the hedgerows are either still holding flowers or berries. So that habitat itself is not just for the birds that may nest in it, it's also the subsequent species that may use it as a corridor, and that feeds into the connectivity benefit. Connectivity being a definition of how easy it is for a species to move across the landscape. Hedgerows act as a nice corridor for animals moving across them, but also they can act as a bit of a barrier if animals are trying to move through them, so to speak, which if you're a predator or prey, that can be beneficial in different varying levels. Connectivity we're going to touch on a bit later, because you can actually start to quantify connectivity. So we can start to appraise different farms on their connectivity based on their existing habitat networks, where their existing hedgerows are, but not only just the simple location of the hedgerow, but also the condition, the width of that hedgerow as well, being a key measure. And the other ecological importance of hedgerows is they are really, really good water traps. They really work well at slowing down the flow, and obviously their root system as well acts as a bit of a filtration system. So by strategically putting hedgerows in the right place, what it can do is it can protect watercourses. Obviously putting hedgerows along a ditch or a water body is going to provide that protection, but also in the landscape, by understanding where your water is flowing, you can also understand maybe where to best plant a hedge. And I know, for example, Jenny at Flag Southwest was very keen about double hedges, which is, if you identify where you've got a flow pathway, maybe one line of hedge isn't enough. You could actually double up the line of hedgerows to get, twice as much interception of that water. So that's really an overarching view of, the ecological importance of a hedge. We at the Land are really keen to see more hedgerows restored. So we're starting to do a bit of gap analysis, which just allows you to identify quickly where there's gaps in hedgerows. I'm sure you all as land managers or as agents to farms and land managers know where there's already gaps, but it can be quite tiresome to count the total meters and then apply for funding. We are trying to really tighten the screws on that process and speed it up. But ultimately, our aim is to try and get a more connected landscape using hedges and edges and riparian corridors to try and connect up the landscape. And in our head, we can try and find out what good looks like. Before I get into more on the land app demo and the WildEdges that I'm going to be demonstrating, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the Oxfordshire Treescapes. So we've been fortunate enough to work closely with the partners that created it, which include the University of Oxford, Grow Green Carbon, and the Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre. The data I'm just going to show it isn't land apps. They're just using land app as a conduit to share the data with the prospective partners. So Treescapes itself is trying to use research to articulate to landowners where they can put in interventions. So the map on the screen at the moment is showing a parish where there's an opportunity for woodland buffers, so for recolonizing existing woodlands, existing woodland edges, sorry, to try and just improve what we call an ecotone. And so the ecotone is that edge habitat between the main woodland and then the neighboring habitat, whether that's an arable field, a grassland, or other. And it's those edges that I'm quite passionate about recolonizing and just focusing on, because too often do we see in our artificial landscapes, in farm landscapes, arable field going straight to tall woodland trees. Now in nature, you just don't see that. What you really need is this more gradual, 3, 5, 20 meter ecotone that can act as a transitional habitat, and that can include long tussocky grasses for things like dormice, brambles and scrub, but it gives that more sloping profile to the landscape rather than this steep edged side that we too often see. So that's just one of the examples that I extracted from the Treescapes data set, because I think it's quite a nice soft touch that you can apply. It's not taking up productive land, it's just looking at what are your existing assets and how do we protect them. And it's worth saying as well that in the new English Woodland Creation Offer, those ecotones, those transitional habitats, you can now get funding for recolonization. So it used to be that you only get paid to actually plant trees, but now you can actually use natural recolonization if it's within 75 meters of a woodland. And so these types of areas that you can see on the map are eligible for funding. And what's great about it is you don't actually have to plant the trees manually. You can just let the natural seed stock, whether that's through the jays and other species caching them underground, you can let those naturally regenerate. And therefore our job as the land app is trying to help people identify where those are. So Treescapes is a really nice use case where people can see existing woodlands and then where they might be able to recolonize 10-meter buffers around those woodlands to hopefully see that greater connectivity and that greater edge habitat. The Treescapes project isn't just looking at woodland creation or woodland edges. They're also covering a whole range of other habitat types in Oxfordshire. So they're looking at quote unquote agroforestry, which is where do we start incorporating trees into both an arable and a pastoral system. So through silver arable, identifying where there might be opportunities for fields to have rows of trees where you can crop in between and where that's suitable, and obviously where that's not suitable. And the same for silver pasture as well. So putting in rows of trees within a grass system for the livestock or the hay to be grown in between. There's obviously a lot of benefits for doing that. We've mentioned connectivity, but by putting, for example, trees within a pastoral landscape, you're also going to get the benefits of shading, both from the sun and the wind. And as we're seeing more extreme weather patterns, giving your livestock in particular and your crops a bit of protection from those extreme ends of the spectrum is going to hopefully help productivity. I know there's a lot of research showing, the impact, for example, on livestock shivering and their weight gain. So if you can give them somewhere to shelter, especially in the cold, away from the wind, you're hopefully going to see better financial returns from those livestock. Other habitats they're looking at as well are orchards, species-rich grasslands, and wetlands as well. And they're predominantly focused on the Oxfordshire border at the moment, or within the Oxfordshire county, I should say, but they are looking at working with us to roll that out a bit further. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. What I wanted to do now, and I'm going to come back to the connectivity model in a minute. I forgot that was that next slide. What I want to do now is just explain in a similar fashion to what the woodland buffers are doing, which is serving to you as a landowner where you could do things. What I want to now just demonstrate is how you can use the land app to create what we call a wild edge. And a wild edge is a similar workflow that we've created in partnership with the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, Wild East, Chumney Estate, and Consano Earth to deliver to landowners in hopefully a clean and concise way, where they could be widening existing hedgerow networks and joining up those riparian edges as well. So as always, I've gone onto the landapp.com. I'm going to assume that you've all got an account here, but if not, please do check out our help and guidance. And I'm going to click the login button. That should then take me to my demo account, where you can just see some demo maps. From here, I'm going to create a demo of WildEdges, and I'm going to assign it to my farming team. And from this map, I just want to show you just more of a showcase the speed of which you can, for a client or for yourself, generate a WildEdges program, WildEdges project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import some data from the Rural Payment Agency by choosing the import button, paste in my SBI number, and for now I'm just going to download my land cover and my hedges. That's then sending a request to the Rural Payment Agency, and I'm sure many of you have seen this process quite a few times now. Depending on how busy that request is, it might take a little moment. But once LandApp has then got the data, it then asks you to choose a template, for which I'm going to choose basic payment scheme for now. Name it BPS my farm, and then hit finish. So that's now dropped on my farm, dropped on my map, my farm's data, both the location, the field parcels, and because I chose the basic payment scheme template, it's also assigned those land cover codes for me. So where the permanent grassland, where the woodland is, etc. As a note, the arable fields just come down as blank arable fields because it needs a bit more definition on the basic payment. But once you've got this map, to run a WildEdges process, the final step is to hit the new button again, but instead we're going to choose that buy data button. So I'm just going to move my Zoom link out of the way. And then in here, you can see we've got WildEdges. We are in the process of building, I think we've got 4 more proof of concepts that have already been built. We're just going to be probably putting them in here for now, but we are just speaking to some designers, some UI, UX designers on best way of displaying and delivering the data to you. But I'm going to show you the WildEdge workflow that when you click on that, it's then you have to fill out this small form on the left-hand side. The first one says define your purchase area. Now what this means is you can either use an existing plan. So I can basically say to the land app, only serve me WildEdges that are within my boundary, within my BPS that I've got loaded. Or if you want to maybe do part of the farm, you can hit create a frame and then choose which part of the farm you want the data to run. And all this does is basically it will just clip any data that's outside of it and remove that from your project. So if I were to, for example, create a frame and just put it all the way around the outside of all of it, it's just going to serve everything. Intersect setting is a similar principle as, do you want any fuzzy edges to be left? And what that means is if it was here, for example, do you want any hedge that crosses the red line? Do you want it to continue all the way and show the rest, or do you want it to be cut hard at that red line? And that principle, by the way, works for all of our buy data buttons. So if you're purchasing, for example, Ordnance Survey Master Map, that's the same principle. Once you then defined your frame, you can give it a name, demo farm, and then you again type in that SBI number and then hit buy now. And what this is doing is exactly the same principle as the download of the BPS data, but instead of us just serving it to you raw, it runs it through our WildEdge algorithm. So hopefully when I refresh, it would have taken the main features that make up a wild edge, which is the hedgerows and the riparian corridors, and it has served me an LMP, a land management plan, a future vision for the farm. So just to make the map a bit clearer, I'm going to turn off my hedge network and turn off my land covers. And what it's done is it's then dropped on the map my wild edge file. And so this is vector shapes. And when we say vector, they are shapes that you can click on, interact with, and get the area of. And we've served to you where we suggest you might be eligible for putting in wild edges. And the logic's fairly simple. And just to explain that is that what we've done is we've just taken the existing hedgerow data, which in this case is this adjacent hedge, and we've added either side of that hedge. We've added at the moment 3 meters, but we're in discussions with some of the partners like Cheshire Wildlife Trust that we might reduce that a bit to probably one extra meter rather than it being 3. But we've also, just as note as the recent update, we've actually minused off 1 meter either side of the existing hedgerow. So we used to, as of one week ago, serve everything immediately to that left and right of that hedge, but obviously we might be double counting any existing hedgerows. And I bet you if I turn on Bing imagery, you can't quite see it. It's not, it doesn't even look, I think the Bing imagery is slightly off compared to where our RPA data is. So yeah, you can see that the hedgerow is more underneath this purple one. So again, just take it with a bit of caution. It's more of a suggestion. But we basically served the data with a purposeful gap in the middle, so you're not double counting that extra hedgerow area, which in this case, would have been 0.2 hectares either side. So we've got 3 meters of scrub, or a bit of scrub re-enhancement, and this line, this purple area, just represents natural regeneration. We think there's scope for most hedgerows in the country to just get wider by 1 meter or 2. The great thing about that is that it should be minimal effort. Obviously, it's changed the cutting regime and the cutting practice and the regularity, but hopefully just allowing your hedgerows just to get a little bit thicker, we start to see a bit more habitat availability for the different species. And then either side of that, what we've done is we put in a grass buffer. In the description, you can see that we've dictated that we either want it to be a permanent tussocky grassland, or you can explore woodland planting if you're interested, say a shelter belt. But we are delivering it as G3. And the reason we've started delivering it as G3 now, neutral grassland rather than C1A arable margins, is because the biodiversity unit's potential is greater. So what we're really trying to do, and we're working this out with one of our ELMS trials, is what is the biodiversity unit impact or opportunity for doing a wild edge, and by trying to create a neutral grassland, which is a semi-natural habitat that's scored higher than an arable margin because it's more permanent, you can actually generate more units. So anyone who ran the wild edges before last week will have it mostly as C1A arable margins. But if you rerun it now and it delivers G3A and plug that into a biodiversity unit calculator, you'll score more points. And obviously it's more of a theoretical. You're still going to have to get a survey to apply for those B and G units, but the potential is obviously then greater. And in reality, over time, you are trying to create a neutral grassland. You're not creating an arable field margin because that's a non-permanent feature, and we're hoping wild edges are more permanent than that. So this is your habitat feature. I've had some good feedback as well from colleagues and users of the software that you can run a wild edge and copy features from your wild edge. So for example here, and copy it onto a countryside stewardship plan as well. So you're not restrained to keeping it within the WildEdges BNG type calculations. You can bring it over to be a countryside stewardship feature, which then you can apply, whatever your countryside stewardship option might be, maybe 8, for example. So what the WildEdges process does is it's generating data for you. It's hyper granular, it's relevant to your farm, but hopefully it's flexible. It's not telling you what you should do, it's telling you what you could do, but also giving you the shapes to then create more plans. So flying across this farm, you can see that those are the hedge networks that we're promoting. The logic also has an exclusion zone. So firstly, it doesn't serve any wild edges outside of your SBI number. So there's no data that's outside of my boundary, and it will clip it to any farm buildings or lakes or ponds. So you can only create a wild edge on existing grassland or existing arable. It doesn't let you, for example, put existing woodland into a wild edge. And this principle of us serving suggestions is something, just as the Land App team are really going to start honing in on for the next 6 months, is just suggesting to landowners scenarios based on research, based on partners' ambitions, for where you as a landowner or you as an agent can start promoting habitat recovery. The other feature that's also drawn down as well, just to show you, there's a pond up here. It also takes all the existing water bodies and adds a buffer to those. So it just ensures that any water courses that you have under your management have a 6-meter buffer. So that's both ditches and streams and ponds, but also main water courses like rivers. They both come out as neutral grassland now. So all watercourse buffers and hedgerow buffers come out as neutral grassland, simply due to feedback from the Cheshire Wildlife Trust around biodiversity unit potential and what's more realistic. At a high level, then, once you've done your WildEdge calculation, what this will hopefully visualize, or at least start visualizing, is the impact that you're having on improved connectivity. So obviously those hedges are already there. You're going to get a better landscape, more connected landscape if you make those hedges more healthy, and they score higher on say a condition assessment. I'm just going to finish the Land App demo by showing just the summary table. So just to show you that if I were hypothetically for this farm going to do just these wild edges, obviously I haven't added anything new. I can summarize nice and quickly using my report the total area of new habitat that I'm looking to create. So just through this 130 hectare farm, I'm creating 1% extra mixed scrub and just over 1%, 1.5 hectares of neutral grassland. And that that does add up over time. And obviously when it's on the Land App and you're working with a customer and your clients, or just internally, you can add things to this management plan. It's not fixed. You can connect up buffer strips. You can designate whole fields to wildflower meadows. You can try cover cropping. You can try agroforestry. But it just gives you a bit of a head start, a bit of a template to start that mapping process. Okay, so what I want to do now is scoot over to the next part of the demo, which is just give you a quick overview of our future work that we're doing. And this is more around trying to systemize the connectivity scoring process. So as I mentioned, the importance of connectivity, especially for habitats, but also for just general environmental health. Connectivity is a really key measure. And what we've done is we've derived some algorithms to start quantifying off your plans, so off either your baseline plans or your land management plans, how you're doing currently in terms of connectivity. We also, and in this demo I'll show, you can also see how uplift is generated as well. So the 4 metrics that we're using is, the first one is just connectivity percentage or connectedness percentage, which is looking at the semi-natural habitats. So your grasslands, your wetlands, your woodlands, and your scrub corridors and hedgerows. How connected are they to one another? And so this is just a percentage of the habitats that are within 20 meters of each other. So therefore it's basically identifying what percentage is in isolation, how many woodland blocks or reed beds or species rich grassland are in isolation, and your objective is to increase that number. The next one is the number of unconnected components, which is the looking at all of those semi-natural habitats, how many in total are in isolation. So it's kind of a fragmentation score, and you're obviously trying to decrease that number. Your core to edge ratio is looking at just your core productive farmed habitats. So basically anything that's not a semi-natural habitat or an urban feature. How close as a percentage is all of that farm to a semi-natural habitat? And this is a really nice measure of things like integrated pest management. How easy is it, for example, for a helpful predatory beetle to make its way into your crop and start eating any aphids you might have? So again, you're trying to increase that percentage. And then the final one is just the percentage cover of semi-natural habitats. So that's just the total number of habitats against your total area of farmland. And again, you're trying to increase that. This final one, as a note, you might hear people say the word 30 by 30. So I know the wildlife trusts, for example, are really trying to push 30 by 30, 30% of land, at least dedicated to nature either through habitat creation or agroecological practices, but trying to get that percentage up for our land coverage. So I'm just going to demonstrate for, oh yeah, it's worth saying actually before acknowledgements, this isn't just a land app thing. We've been working with WildEast in particular about building this up, and had some funding from Consano Earth through WildEast. And also we've had some good feedback and helpful suggestions through the Oxford University and the Surrey Wildlife Trust. So I just wanted to quickly show you a demonstration for a client so that we've been working up with up in Somerleyton, part of the WildEast project. But just to show you through those scores and how they change. So this map, the green indicates the existing semi-natural habitats before they went into countryside stewardship. So scoring 68% connectivity, 106 fragments. So that's 106 different little blocks of woodland, etc., that were isolated. 11.52% of the farmland was within 10 meters of edge habitat. So there's quite a few agricultural fields, especially in the east, and not within 10 meters of those buffer zones. But naturally, the estate itself has got a pretty high cover of semi-natural habitats, mainly due to the big woodland block in the north. As they put in their countryside stewardship, that number dramatically increases. So you can see the area of wildflower cover, pollen mixes, margins, etc., birdseed covers, just firstly increase the connectivity of the whole. So all these semi-natural habitats jumped up 21% in connectivity. Also the fragmentation score dropped down by 42 points to 64. And also you're starting to see an increase in that core to edge ratio as well. So we've gone up 14%. That means 14% more farmland is within 10 meters of a margin or a buffer strip or a beetle bank. And then we went one step further, which was asking the question, if we were to create a wild edge on every single field boundary, what would that do to the score as well? And so that now is represented on orange on the map as well. And you can see that we've now gone up from the base case by nearly 30%. It's mainly because these fields in the east, which weren't in an existing stewardship or still aren't, would be connected. And so what these scores are hopefully demonstrating is, one, that we can start to quantify this and appraise different farms. And we appreciate that different parts of the country are going to have different benchmarks of what good looks like. But we're hopefully justifying and illustrating the importance of hedges and edges and riparian corridors in your overall connectivity. So by looking after and thinking about your farm in a more of a circuit theory way, is my main woodland block connected to another woodland? You can nice and quickly start to quantify what the different benefits are. I apologize, there's a phone going. So that's the connectivity score. And just as a note, if anyone's interested in getting their connectivity scores running, we're still trying to basically test the principle, but do get in touch with support at the Land App if you're interested in having a connectivity score run for your farm, estate, or cluster. One step that we're looking to improve on, although this isn't really being used that much at the moment, the algorithm itself not only can quantify the connectivity, it can also start to optimize the network. And what we mean by with this is that all of those edges in that blue sky report, it's really hard for a farmer being pragmatic to put in all those edges. So what we're working on now is not only showing you where all the edges you could put on, which edge actually contributes the most to the optimization of that connectivity. So this is quite a dramatic case, but we found that a single edge that connects blocks, the west block and the east block, which is this one, made the connectivity jump from 47 to 93%. So being pragmatic with data can actually start steering, we hope, prioritization within farming. And this is something we're hoping to roll out next year. Just as a note, mobile app, the testing is underway at the moment. I've got it on my phone, very exciting. Just to let you know that it will be coming out in January. First version, expectation management, won't be a full bells and whistles version of the Land App available on your phone. It's more of a stepping stone to that process. So we're going to be looking at in-field measurements, photo evidencing, being able to GPS position, so you'll be able to know where you are in relation to things, and obviously measure those accordingly. And also there's some satellite data, etc. in the background. Okay, so just checking my notes. The final to touch just around funding schemes for hedgerows. Let me just get a map up, a nice image to start with. What I wanted to just touch on is at the moment there are a number of funding mechanisms that you can apply for. Woodland Trust, for example, has a hedgerow pot that you can apply for 75%. Countryside stewardship is another good way of going through if you've got hedgerow that needs planting. Especially for those, there's been a couple of farmers speaking to us that are still enrolling on their HLS. I know at the moment there's still a bit of uncertainty with DEFRA around elms, which I hope is going to be ironed out soon by some good communication and some clarity. But if you are in your current HLS, get in touch with an advisor. If you need help being joined up with one, let us know. But obviously, hopefully you've all got at least some support somewhere from someone. But yeah, the capital items under countryside stewardship are another really good way to go. At the moment, I'm looking at hedgerows with relation to the carbon markets and the biodiversity markets, but watch this space on those because there's still this, I still fundamentally believe there's still an undervaluation of hedgerows within those two schemes. But yeah, it'd be interesting if there's any questions or any comments that anyone wants to make on hedgerow funding schemes within the group, please feel free to put them into the Q&A function as you want. Okay, so that's kind of covered all the slides that I wanted to cover today, unless any of my colleagues who are on the call want to add anything. But if there's any questions or comments that you want to add, please do put them on the Q&A function.